My name is Dana Whitaker. I'm 44 years old, and I've landed a jet in a crosswind at O'Hare with 180 souls behind me. But at our 20th anniversary party, my husband raised his glass in a country club full of his hospital board and called me, quote, cabin decoration, floating above the clouds while I raised our kids alone. Then he smiled at his assistant, Renee, the way a man smiles at a secret. 200 people laughed. I didn't cry, because 3 months earlier I'd started noticing something. Grant was telling neighbors, teachers, even our family doctor that I was unstable, forgetful, building a story. What Grant forgot is that every hour I fly is logged, time-stamped, official. And on every day he swore I was neglecting our children, I was strapped into a cockpit, while his car's GPS was parked outside her apartment. The country club ballroom smelled like warm champagne and cut peonies, and someone had strung small white lights along the ceiling beams, so the whole room looked like it was floating. I remember thinking that. Floating. I didn't know yet how that word would come back to bite me before the night was over. 200 people, easy. The hospital board was there in full. Owen Brandt at the head table with his wife, a row of trustees in navy blazers, 3 of the younger surgeons Grant liked to keep close. 20 years of marriage gets you a room like this. I stood near the cake table in the blue dress Theo had picked out for me at the mall, my heels already pinching, and I watched Grant take the microphone from the DJ with the easy confidence of a man who has never once doubted a room would love him. 20 years, he said, and the room quieted the way rooms do for him. 20 years with this woman. He found me across the floor and raised his glass. I raised mine back out of reflex. People ask me how I did it, he said. Running the hospital, raising Theo and Lena practically solo some months. And I tell them you do it because you have to, because someone in this family had to be on the ground. A small laugh rippled through the crowd, warm, indulgent. My wife's a pilot. Captain, actually. Very impressive. Flies for a living, out over the clouds while the rest of us keep our feet on the ground and keep this family running. He paused, timed it. So, tonight I want to toast my cabin decoration. Beautiful. Always up there somewhere. Never quite landed. The laugh that followed was bigger than the first one. I felt it land on my skin like something physical. I did not set down my glass. I did not look away from him. I have flown into wind shear at 400 feet with a stall horn screaming, and I know what my own face does when I refuse to give something the reaction it's fishing for. I gave Grant that face now. Beside him, close enough that her shoulder nearly touched his jacket, Renee Colson smiled down at her own glass like she was in on something. She was 31, wore her hair in that soft low bun she always did for hospital galas, and she did not look at me once. She didn't need to. The not looking was its own kind of announcement. I scanned the room instead of her. Owen Brandt was nodding slowly, the particular nod of a man moved by a story about sacrifice. 2 trustees near him exchanged a look I read easily. What a good father. A woman I didn't know, maybe a donor, actually pressed a hand to her chest. That toast was something. A voice murmured near my elbow. It was Marcy Isles, my first officer on the Denver route, sliding in beside me in a green dress, her champagne untouched. You want me to spill red wine on him? I can make it look like an accident. Save it, I said. I might need worse than wine before this is over. Marcy's eyes stayed on me a second too long, the way they did when she was reading a checklist for something she suspected was already broken. You know I've got copies of your duty rosters going back 3 years. Every layover, every trip, logged. Just in case anyone ever wants to argue you weren't around. Why would you keep those? Because my ex-husband tried the same move on me in front of a judge, she said quietly. Nobody believed me until I had paper. I filed that away like a heading correction. Small, but I'd need it later. They believed Grant instantly, the board did. 20 years of me flying international routes, so we could make the mortgage on the house Grant liked to call his. 20 years of me covering Theo's tuition deposit the year the hospital cut executive bonuses, and in one sentence Grant had rewritten all of it into absence. Into me being the problem. I thought about pulling my flight logs up on my phone right there, just to watch his face change. I didn't. Not yet. That door wasn't mine to open in front of 200 witnesses. Instead, I smiled, small, controlled, the smile you give a passenger who's panicking over turbulence that isn't actually dangerous, and I raised my glass another inch so it would read from a distance like I was in on the joke too. To Grant, I said, quiet enough that only the people near me heard it, who always knows exactly where everyone is. Nobody caught the edge in it except, I think, Owen, whose eyes flicked to me for half a second longer than the room required. The party went on. There was dancing, there was a slideshow of old photos Lena had helped assemble, and near the dessert table Renee drifted up beside me, bright and casual, like we were friends running into each other. You must be exhausted, she said, with your schedule. Not tonight, I said, and left it there like a door I chose not to open. By 11, Grant was driving us home, one hand loose on the wheel, streetlights sliding gold across his knuckles. He didn't apologize. He didn't even seem to think there was anything to apologize for. You should talk to a lawyer, he said, easy as weather. For the kid's sake. I looked at the side of his face for a long moment, at how relaxed he was saying it, like a man reading off a checklist he'd already finished twice. It wasn't an insult this time. It was a plan. The phone rang at 2:47 on a Tuesday afternoon, and I remember the exact time because I was standing in the kitchen with a mug of coffee gone cold, 3 hours off a red-eye from Seattle. Mrs. Whitaker? This is Ms. Fenwick, Lena's teacher. Yes, hi. Is everything okay? A pause. Longer than it needed to be. I just wanted to check in. Is everything okay at home? I set the mug down. I'm sorry, what do you mean? It's just, Grant mentioned things have been a little unpredictable lately. That there've been some mornings where pickup got confused, and he wanted us to be understanding if you seemed a little. She searched for the word, scattered, when you came in. I didn't say anything for a second. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a lawnmower started up 2 houses down. Scattered. I repeated. He said it's been a hard stretch. With your schedule. Ms. Fenwick's voice had the careful brightness of someone reading off a script she didn't fully believe. I just wanted you to know we're not judging. We just want Lena to feel secure. I told her Lena was always secure, thanked her for calling, and hung up. Then I stood in my kitchen and did something I hadn't done in 20 years of marriage. I opened my flight log on my laptop and started cross-referencing dates against a story I hadn't been told I was in. The lawnmower kept going outside. I didn't hear it anymore. That was the first call. It wasn't the last. 3 days later, my neighbor Priya stopped me at the mailbox, sunglasses pushed up into her hair, holding her own mail like a prop she'd forgotten she was carrying.
Donna. Hey.
How are you holding up? Holding up from what? She blinked. Grant mentioned you'd been having a rough patch. He said you miss Lena's spelling bee. She said it gently, like handing me something breakable. I had not missed Lena's spelling bee. I had flown home a day early to make it, sat in the 3rd row of the elementary school gymnasium in my uniform because I hadn't had time to change, and watched my daughter misspell rhythm and laugh about it into my shoulder afterward. I was there, I said. Priya's face did something complicated, relief and confusion fighting for space.
Oh, well.
Maybe I misunderstood. I smiled at her the way I smile at a passenger who's had too much wine and wants to tell me how turbulence works. Polite.
Closed.
Maybe you did. Then it was Dr. Aldous, our family physician of 11 years, who called under the pretense of a routine reminder about Lena's booster shots and somehow, 3 minutes into the conversation, mentioned that Grant had asked him, off the record, doctor to doctor, whether extended shift work could affect cognitive steadiness in a person my age. He asked if flying could make someone forgetful. I said flatly, unstable. He framed it as concern, Dr. Aldous said, a little defensive now, sensing he'd said too much. I told him fatigue affects everyone. I didn't diagnose anything, Dana.
I want to be clear about that.
I appreciate you telling me. I hung up and sat at the kitchen island with my laptop open, 3 tabs already stacked from the last 2 calls, Miss Fenwick's, Priya's, and now this one. I stopped reacting and started building a checklist. Column 1. The date each person said something had gone wrong. Column 2. What I was actually doing that day, pulled straight from FlightAware records and my own cruise scheduling app, time-stamped and unambiguous. It felt less like defending myself and more like reading back an altitude clearance. Cold, procedural, the only language that had never once lied to me. I found the spelling, the date first. I'd landed at 4:12 that afternoon, a Denver turn, wheels down 40 minutes before I walked into that gymnasium in uniform.
Documented.
Undeniable. Then I scrolled to the date Miss Fenwick had mentioned, the confused pickup, and my stomach dropped. I hadn't just been working that day. I'd been at cruising altitude over Nebraska, 37,000 feet. Radio checks logged every 20 minutes. First Officer Marcy Isles in the right seat beside me the entire 4-hour block. I picked up my phone and texted her before I could second-guess it. "Marcy, the Denver turned 3 weeks ago. You remember that leg?" Her reply came back in under a minute. "Yeah, bumpy over Nebraska."
Why?
I stared at the row of numbers on my screen, the tail number, the departure time, the arrival gate, and felt something settle into place that was colder than anger. If I was at 37,000 feet that afternoon, logged, time-stamped, witnessed by a second pilot, and an entire air traffic control record, then who had been supposed to pick up my daughter? Nobody had signed for Lena that day. That was the first thing I confirmed, sitting at my kitchen table at 11 at night with my laptop open to the school's parent portal, the cursor blinking over an empty pickup log. I called the after-school office the next morning before my showtime. A woman named Ms. Fenwick answered, brisk, apologetic in the practiced way of someone who fields the same complaint weekly. "Mrs. Whitaker," she said, "I did speak with your husband about that afternoon. He explained the sitter had a family emergency and that you were—" a pause, papers shuffling. "Unreachable." "Unreachable how?" "He said your phone goes to voicemail for hours at a time."
Given your job.
I sat very still. My phone had been on airplane mode for exactly the 4 hours I was in the air that day, and for every minute before and after it worked fine. I did not say that yet. I thanked her and hung up, then opened a blank document and typed the date at the top, the way I'd log a discrepancy on a pre-flight walk-around. Small, precise, time-stamped. The sitter's name was Alyssa Chin. I found her through the payment app Grant, and I still shared a leftover joint account neither of us had closed, useful now in ways he probably hadn't considered. I texted her, casual, asking if she remembered the day at the park in March when Lena had gotten locked out after school. She called me instead of texting back. "I felt bad about that," Alyssa said. "Mr. Whitaker texted me around 1 that day, said he'd handle pickup himself, told me to take the afternoon off."
So I did.
Then I guess something changed? Because Lena told me later she waited almost 40 minutes at the office. "Did he tell you that himself? Take the afternoon off." "Yeah, it's still in my messages if you want me to check the timestamp."
I did want that.
I wrote it down. 1:04 p.m. Grant releases sitter. Somewhere around 3:15 p.m., Lena is alone at the front office. And somewhere in between, a message goes out to Miss Fenwick, not from Grant's number, I'd learn later, but forwarded, framed, made to look like concern rather than construction. I didn't confront him that night. I made dinner. I helped Theo with a chemistry worksheet. I put Lena to bed and read her half of a chapter about a girl and a lighthouse, and when she asked why I was staring at the wall instead of the page, I told her I was just tired, which was true in a way she didn't need explained. Once the house was quiet, I called Marcy. "Say that again," she said, when I told her about the sitter, about Miss Fenwick's unreachable. He set it up, so it looks like I dropped her.
Donna.
"Pull your schedule. All of it. Every date he's ever used against you. I want you to check it against dispatch times before you say one more word to him." A pause. Glasses clinking against a counter on her end. I did this. Different flavor, same recipe. My ex built a whole custody argument out of nights I was supposedly gone. Turned out every single one was a night I was standing in front of a judge's own courthouse, teaching a CRM class. "Pull the paper, Dana."
Don't argue.
"Prove it." So I pulled the paper. March 14th, Lena stranded at school. I was on a Denver turn, wheels up 1:40 p.m., back on the ground by 6:55, logged in the company dispatch system down to the minute. April 2nd, The day Priya said I'd missed the school fundraiser. I was in recurrent training, badge scanned into the simulator building at 8:02 a.m., scanned out at 4:47 p.m., a record living on a server Grant couldn't touch. I laid the dates against his claims one by one, and one by one, they broke in my favor. I built a spreadsheet.
Date.
Grant's claim. My actual location. Source of proof. Full crew schedule for 8 months, requested through the company portal. Every dispatch log. Every badge in and out. Copies went onto a drive that lived nowhere near our shared laptop. It was past midnight when I went looking for the daycare invoice from that March afternoon, wanting the exact billing record to pin down Alyssa's hours. I logged into the joint checking account instead of the app, scrolling back through March, and that was when I saw it, a recurring charge I didn't recognize, same amount, same day of the month, going out to a property management company on the other side of the city, nowhere near our house. A rental payment. Not under Grant's name. Not under mine. Under a name I'd never seen before. The name on the lease wasn't the only thing I found. The lease document was still open on my laptop when I closed it, set the laptop on the passenger seat, and just sat there in my own driveway for a full minute before I turned the key. Not to drive anywhere. To think. The insurance company had installed that tracker 3 years ago, back when Grant's SUV got broken into outside a hospital fundraiser, and he'd wanted peace of mind. I remembered him saying that phrase at the dinner table, peace of mind, while Theo rolled his eyes about Wi-Fi and the car being enough tracking for one family. I'd forgotten the app even existed. It lived on my phone in a folder labeled insurance, 3 menus deep, next to the flood policy and the dental plan. I opened it now. The map loaded slow, the little blue pin blinking somewhere on the east side of town, an address I didn't recognize.
I zoomed in.
Cedar Row Apartments. Then I tapped history, and a column of timestamps unspooled down the screen like a printed manifest. Tuesday, 8:14 p.m. to 11:02 p.m. Thursday, 7:40 p.m. to 10:55 p.m. The following Monday, 6:58 p.m. to 11:47 p.m. Each one logged at the same address. Each one on a night Grant had told me, in that flat administrative voice he used for hospital business, that he was covering for Dr. Okafor's late rounds, or stuck in a credentialing meeting, or driving Owen Brandt home after a board dinner.
I didn't gasp.
I didn't drop the phone. I sat very still, the way you sit when the seatbelt light comes on, and you're waiting to see if it's real turbulence or just a bump. I drove there. Not that night. The next evening, after Lena was asleep and Theo was upstairs with his headphones on loud enough that I could hear the tinny overlap of a video game through his door. I told myself I was only confirming an address, the way I'd confirm a runway assignment before I committed to a heading. Cedar Row was a beige 3-story building with a courtyard fountain that wasn't running. I parked across the street, engine off, hands on the wheel like I was still flying it. At 8:20 p.m., Grant's SUV pulled into the lot. I watched him get out, straighten his jacket the way he did before hospital board photos, and walk to a door on the second floor without once checking his phone for directions. He already knew the way. The door opened before he knocked. I didn't see her face clearly, just an arm, a sliver of light, the door closing again. I sat there until the streetlights buzzed on. I did not go up. I did not call his name. I wrote down the unit number on the back of a boarding pass I found in my bag, the way I'd note a tail number, nothing more than data, and drove home under the speed limit. At home, I looked up the leasing office's public rental listings, cross-referenced with the county property records site, free and searchable, something I'd used before when we bought our own house. The lease for Unit 214, Cedar Row, had been signed 4 months ago. The name on the file was Renee Colson. I read it twice. For months, I said out loud, to no one, just to hear how long that was. 4 months of credentialing meetings. For months of Owen needing a ride home. I closed the browser tab and went to check on Lena, who was asleep with one arm flung off the side of the bed like she'd fallen out of the sky mid-flight. I straightened her blanket. I did not wake her. I did not cry. Somewhere underneath the calm there was something colder settling into place, like cabin pressure equalizing after a long climb. Not comfortable, but stable. I thought about walking into Grant's study right then, laptop under my arm, and putting the address on the desk between us. I pictured his face going white, then blank, the way it went blank whenever he was caught and needed a beat to build the next lie. I let myself have that picture for exactly as long as it took to see it, and then I set it down, the way you set down a checklist item you're not ready to execute yet. Because here was the thing I knew from 16 years in a cockpit. You don't confront turbulence. You fly through it, and you let the black box tell the story later. I opened a new folder on my laptop and named it Documentation. I moved the lease screenshot into it, then the GPS history, exported as a PDF with every timestamp intact. I added the badge logs Marcy had shown me. I did not sleep much that night, but I didn't need to. I had done longer duty days on less rest, at 37,000 feet, responsible for 200 people who trusted a stranger's voice over the intercom. I could sit awake in my own kitchen and hold this. Around midnight, my phone buzzed against the counter.
Marcy.
Dana, she said, when I picked up, no hello first, which told me something was wrong before she even finished the sentence. I need to tell you something. Someone from your husband's office called the airline today, asking about your flight schedule. I set my phone on the kitchen counter and looked at it the way I'd look at a warning light on a pre-flight checklist. Not panicking, just noting the color. Someone from Grant's office, asking about my schedule. I called Marcy.
Can you meet? I said.
Not a question. Denny's on Route 9. 20 minutes. She was already in the booth when I got there. 2 coffees ordered, her flight bag still on the seat beside her like she'd come straight from a debrief.
Marcy Isles didn't do small talk.
She slid a napkin across the table before I'd even sat down, and on it she'd written a name and a time. HR called me first, she said, because I flew with you March 14th. They wanted to confirm crew pairing. Why would they call you at all? That's not how it works. It's not, which is why I asked who requested the callback. She wrapped both hands around her mug and didn't drink. A woman phoned the crew scheduling desk at our airline. Said she was calling on behalf of family.
Said she was worried about you.
Asked if there'd been any, her words, irregularities in Captain Whitaker's recent duty days. The waitress came by. I waved her off without looking up. Irregularities, I repeated. They logged it, Dana. Because it's a security flag when someone outside the company asks about a pilot's schedule. There's a form. There's always a form. She almost smiled, but it didn't reach anything. The woman gave a name. Said she was your sister. I set my coffee down slower than I meant to. The cup made a small, flat sound against the saucer, too loud in my ears. I don't have a sister.
I know, Marcy said.
I looked at your emergency contact sheet from Crew Ops 2 years ago, when we did that CRM refresher together. You've got a brother in Tucson and a mother in Ann Arbor. No sister. Never has been. Outside the window, a delivery truck idled, exhaust curling up gray against the gray sky. I watched it because I needed somewhere to put my eyes that wasn't Marcy's face, which was doing the thing kind faces do when they're handing you something they know will hurt. So someone lied to get information about my flying, I said slowly, to build a file that says I'm unreliable. On the exact days I'm the most documented, monitored, badge-swiped, logged human being in the state of Colorado. That's the part that should almost be funny, Marcy said. It's not, but it should be. Whoever did this doesn't understand what our job actually is. They think a pilot schedule is soft, like a doctor's office schedule you could hand-wave your way out of. They don't know it's federal. They don't know there's a paper trail so tight it would survive a plane crash, because it's built to. I thought of Grant across 20 years of dinners, nodding along when I explained duty time limits and rest requirements, never once asking a follow-up question. He'd absorbed exactly nothing. Or he had, and he'd been counting on everyone else knowing as little as he pretended to.
Marcy.
I need to ask you something, and you can say no. I already know what you're going to ask. Say it anyway. I don't want to assume. She looked at me straight on then, and something moved behind her eyes that had nothing to do with me, some older weather. You want to know if I'll go on record. Confirm the dates I flew with you. Say it under oath, if it comes to that. She turned her coffee cup a quarter turn on the table, a small precise motion, like She was setting a heading. My ex-husband told a family court judge I was, quote, emotionally unavailable and frequently absent during our daughter's early years. He had a folder, printed calendars with my trips highlighted in yellow, like evidence. He never once mentioned that every one of those trips paid for her daycare. Her jaw tightened, released. I lost 4 months of custody time before my lawyer got the FAA duty logs entered as exhibits. For months, Dana. Because a judge believed a story before he believed a record. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be specific with me instead. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small spiral notebook, the kind we used for approach notes. Tell me every date he's used against you. I'll cross-check my logbook tonight. If I flew with you, I'll write a statement. If I didn't fly with you, but I know where you were, I'll say what I know about cruise scheduling and how it works, so it can't be waved away as coincidence. We spent the next 20 minutes with 2 phones and her paper logbook between us, lining up March 14th, the Denver turn, my badge in at 8:02 on April 2nd, times against Grant stories the way you'd line up instrument readings against a chart. Every discrepancy she found, she circled. By the end there was a small constellation of ink on the page, and none of it left room for another interpretation. This isn't proof of what he's doing, Marcy said finally. Not yet. This is proof of where you were. Someone still has to connect it to what he's saying happened instead. I'm working on that part. She studied me for a second, like she was deciding how much to hand over. There's one more thing. She reached into her bag again and slid a folded printout across the table, her palm flat on top of it for a beat before she let go, as if she wanted me to feel its weight before I read it. I asked a friend in HR to email me what they had. Officially, it's a call log summary. It's not supposed to leave the building. I'm giving it to you anyway. I unfolded it. A single page, a timestamp, a duration, a transcribed note in someone else's clipped shorthand. Caller declined extension, stated she was patient sister, concerned for niece and nephew's safety during mother's flight assignments. I read it twice. I don't have a sister, I said again, quieter this time, mostly to myself. The transcript from HR's callback log sat open on my laptop, cursor blinking after the words, I don't have a sister. I closed the laptop halfway, then opened it again, and forwarded the file to myself at a second address, the one only I checked. Wednesday morning I drove to the Aero Medical Examiner's office on 5th, the one I'd used for 11 years. Dr. Okafor took my blood pressure, listened to my heart, asked the standard questions in the standard order. Any new medications? Any episodes of confusion, memory lapse, blackout? I said no to all of it, and I watched her write no in a box that would exist on paper long after this conversation ended. You're due for the random anyway, she said, sliding a cup across the counter. Line up before or after your regular? Now, I said. I want the date stamped. She looked at me for a second longer than the question required, then nodded and didn't ask why. Some things you don't have to explain to a woman who's watched enough divorces move through a waiting room. The results came back Thursday. Clean panel, blood pressure 118/76, medical certificate renewed through October of next year, signature dated, printed, sealed. I made 3 copies. One went into a folder in my flight bag between my logbook and my passport. One went into the fireproof box in the garage. One I scanned and named it exactly what it was, Whitaker Dana Medical Clean 2024, and dropped it into the same folder where the GPS screenshots lived. I sat with the folder open on the kitchen table longer than I needed to. Lena's homework was still spread across the other end, a worksheet on fractions with a smiley face in red pen. I thought about how strange it was that a stranger with a clipboard now knew more about the state of my mind than my own husband apparently believed. The lawyer's office was on the 4th floor of a building downtown that didn't put her name on the directory, just a suite number, 412, and a receptionist who didn't ask why I'd come in wearing sunglasses in November. Her name was Renata Voss. I picked her because a captain I'd flown with twice, a woman going through her own split, had said only, she doesn't perform sympathy, she just tells you what's true. I gave her the folder. Flight logs. Badge and out records. The medical certificate. The clean talk screen. The GPS history from Cedar Row. She read for a long time without speaking, her pen tapping once against the desk, then still. "This is good work," she said finally. "This is better documentation than I see from people who've hired investigators." She closed the folder. "It's also not going to be enough by itself. It's dated. It's official. It's not a story." That's exactly the problem. She leaned back. "Family court doesn't run on documentation, Mrs. Whitaker. It runs on narrative. Judges are human. They've been listening to a story about you for months. A teacher, a pediatrician, a neighbor, all of them independently confirming the same account. That has weight. Weight your logbook doesn't have unless someone's already looking for a reason to distrust the other story. So, what? I lose because my evidence is real and his is well told. You could. If he files first and frames it first, you spend 2 years playing defense." She tapped the folder. "This is a scalpel. It's precise, and it's useless if nobody's holding still long enough to be cut." I thought of the ballroom, 3 weeks earlier. The way Owen Brandt had nodded along with Grant's toast, the way the room had laughed at the word decoration like it was something warm. Grant hadn't built his case in a courtroom. He'd built it in kitchens and classrooms and church parking lots, one sympathetic sentence at a time, long before any filing existed. "He's not going to wait to file," I said.
No.
Men like this rarely do. They file the day they feel safest, which is usually right after they've secured the room. She slid the folder back across the desk to me. "So don't let the room stay his." I didn't answer that yet. Outside her window, for floors down, a woman was buckling a car seat into the back of an SUV, taking her time, checking it twice before she shut the door. The kind of small, unremarkable carefulness nobody would ever accuse her of failing to show. "There's a gala," I said slowly. "Ethics and integrity. The hospital gives out an award every spring. He's been shortlisted." Renata's expression didn't change, but she picked her pen back up. "Who nominates for that?" "The board. Owen chairs it. Then that's your room." She wrote something down, unhurried, and looked up at me the way Dr. Okafor had, like she already knew the shape of what I wasn't saying yet. "If he files first and tells his story first, she'll spend 2 years defending herself." She caught herself, corrected it without embarrassment. "You'll spend 2 years defending yourself. You need him to expose himself. In front of the people he needs most." The folder was quiet when I found Theo standing by the counter, my phone still in his hand. "Mom." His voice had gone flat, the way it does when he's trying not to sound like a kid. "Whose phone is this?"
It wasn't mine.
It was Grant's old backup phone, the one he'd left charging on the kitchen island for years, forgotten, still logged into everything because he never changed a password in his life. I'd plugged in my own phone next to it that morning and grabbed the wrong one on my way out the door, then set it back down without thinking twice. "Give me that," I said, too fast. He didn't. He turned the screen toward me instead. "Dad texted someone named Renee. It says." He read it aloud, each word landing like a dropped plate. "We need 2 more incidents before the filing. Something with Lena, something with a pickup. Make it look like a pattern, not a one-off." The dishwasher hummed behind me. Somewhere down the hall, Lena was singing to herself in the bath, off-key and happy. No idea the floor under this family had just given out.
Tao?
"He said you were basically not there half the time." His jaw worked. He said it like it was sad, like he felt bad for us. "And this," he shook the phone. "This says he's making stuff up." I set my keys down on the counter very carefully, the way you set down anything you don't trust yourself to hold anymore. 16 years old, and he was looking at me with the exact expression he'd had at 4, right before he cried. Except he wasn't going to cry. He was going to decide something. Here is where I could have opened the folder. Right there, on the kitchen table, medical certificate and flight logs and the GPS history spread out like a winning hand, and let my son watch his father lose. I wanted to. Some ugly, tired part of me wanted to hand him every page and say, look what he did to me. Choose me now. I didn't. "Sit down a second," I said instead, and pulled a chair for him, and one for myself, and left the folder in the drawer where it had been living since March. Your dad and I are having a hard time, I said. Some of what he's told people isn't true. I have proof of that, and I'm handling it the right way, through my lawyer, not through you. But he's lying about you not picking us up. He's lying to Miss Fenwick, and there it was, a name I hadn't given him, meaning he'd read further than that one message, meaning there was more. I know. So show me or not that you weren't, he stopped, hearing himself hating it. I don't need you to defend me, Theo. I need you to be 16. I said it gently. I meant it, but I watched something in him refuse the offer anyway. He didn't ask again that night. Instead, 2 days later, I found him at the kitchen table with my printed cruise schedule from the spring, one I'd left on the counter, unguarded unlike everything else, laid open next to his phone, where he'd pulled up old group texts from the class parents thread. He looked up at me like a man doing math that didn't want to resolve. March 14th, he said. Dad told Miss Fenwick you forgot Lena at pickup. He turned the schedule around to face me, his finger under the line. You had a Denver turn that day. 1:40 to 6:55. He wasn't asking. You were in the air, Mom.
I didn't say anything.
I let him finish it himself, because a thing a 16-year-old works out on his own stays worked out. A thing you hand him, he can talk himself out of later. He set it up, Theo said, quieter now, like the floor had finished falling. He set it up. That was Thursday. By Sunday, the ground moved again, and not in my direction. I heard the garage door first, then Grant's footsteps coming through faster than they needed to, and I knew before he said a word that something had shifted under him too. He came to the kitchen doorway and stood there in his coat, not taking it off, which meant he wasn't staying, which meant this was a delivery. I talked to my attorney, he said, calm, the voice he uses in board meetings when he's already rehearsed the line in the car. He didn't raise it. He didn't have to. Your following my car is illegal, Dana. A small pause, like he was letting the word illegal do its work on me. The court will see who's really the unstable one. He watched my face for the flinch he expected. I gave him nothing. He turned and walked back out to the garage, and through the window I watched his taillights swing out of the driveway, unhurried. A man who believed he had just taken the one weapon out of my hands. He had no idea what else was in the drawer. The garage door hummed shut behind him. I stood in the kitchen holding the phone with the wiped GPS app still open, the map blank where his route history used to be, and I felt something in my chest go very still and very cold, the way it does at cruise altitude when the seatbelt sign clicks off and you realize the hard part isn't over, it's just quiet for a minute. I set the phone on the counter. I did not throw it. I did not cry. I filled the kettle and put it on the burner because my hands needed a job. The insurance app was gone from my phone, deleted along with everything else, but the data behind it had never lived on my phone. I knew that. I'd known it since the day the agent installed the device, a black box the size of a deck of cards wired under the dash, back when Grant and I bundled the cars for the multi-policy discount. The app was just a window. Grant had broken the window. The house behind it was still standing. I called Marcy at 9:40 that night. He deleted it, I said.
The tracking app.
He found it on my phone and wiped his history. There was a pause, then the particular quiet of Marcy thinking, the same quiet she used before a go-around decision.
Dana.
That's a consumer app pulling from a telematic server. Deleting the app doesn't delete the server record. Insurance companies keep that data for years. They use it for claims disputes. I don't know how to get it without going through him. You don't go through him. You go through the carrier. Formal request, in writing, citing the policy number. You're a named insured on that account, aren't you? I was. I'd forgotten that, the small dumb fact that I paid half the premium every month from the joint account, which meant I had every legal right to the data Grant thought he'd erased. I'll call first thing, I said. I'll go with you, if you want a second set of eyes on it. Or a witness who already knows how to read a flight log, in case they hand you something dense. The kettle screamed. I turned off the burner and stood there a moment without pouring anything. 2 days later I sat in a strip mall insurance office in a beige chair that squeaked, across from a claims administrator named Lewis who had a stack of forms and a bored, careful voice. I gave him the policy number. I gave him my ID. I told him I wanted the full telematics export for both vehicles, 90 days back, all timestamps and locations, per the data access clause in Section 14 of the policy, which I had read the night before until I could recite it. Lewis typed for a while. Then he turned the monitor a few degrees, not quite toward me, and said, "This'll take about 10 minutes to generate as a PDF. You want it emailed or on a flash drive?"
"Both," I said.
Marcy, next to me, didn't say anything. She just reached over and put her hand flat on my knee for a second, the way you'd steady someone in turbulence, and took it back. The email came through before we'd even left the parking lot. I opened it in the car with the engine off. 41 pages. Time-stamped GPS pings every few minutes, going back to February. I scrolled to March 14th first, the Denver day, and there it was, clean as a flight strip. The Suburban leaving our driveway at 4:50 p.m., arriving Cedar Row Apartments at 5:11 p.m., parked until 9:38 p.m. The exact window, Grant told Ms. Fenwick. I'd left Lena unsupervised. "He's not just lying about where you were," Marcy said, reading over my shoulder. "He's telling people you were absent during the hours he was there." I didn't answer for a second. I was looking at a Tuesday 2 weeks later, 8:14 p.m. to 11:02 p.m., same address. A Thursday after that, 7:40 to 10:55. A pattern as regular as a duty roster, except it was his, not mine. My phone buzzed on the console. A text from Theo, no message, just 3 photos. I opened them one at a time. Screenshots, his father's phone, propped against something in Theo's room, a thread between Grant and a contact saved as just R. "We need 2 more before he files," one bubble said. "Something with the school, something with a neighbor. Owen's going to ask about her fitness. We want the file thick." Below it, Renee's reply, "I can call the pediatrician's office Thursday. Say I'm your sister." I sat with the phone in my lap for a long moment, the engine ticking as it cooled. My son had chosen a side. I made myself breathe before I texted back, "Thank you, baby, I love you," because whatever came next, he needed to know that first. "He's got a co-conspirator with a paper trail now," Marcy said quietly. "I have a folder," I said. Flight logs. Medical certificate, clean. Toxicology, clean. GPS, recovered. Marcy's statement. And now this. "So call Renata." I did from the parking lot, and Renata Voss listened without interrupting, which was its own kind of answer. "Don't file a counter-motion yet," she said finally. "If you drop all of this on a judge cold, it becomes a credibility fight, and credibility fights favor whoever's been telling a longer story. You need somewhere public. Somewhere he can't spin it as your word against his." I thought of the invitation still sitting unopened on the kitchen counter, gold script on cream cardstock, and I understood, all at once, exactly what it was for. My phone rang again 2 nights later, while I was folding Lena's laundry. "Owen Brandt."
"Donna."
"I hope this isn't a bad time." A pause, careful, the tone of a man choosing his words around something he'd been told. "Grant mentioned you haven't been well lately. I wanted to check in myself." Another pause. "The hospital's holding its Ethics and Integrity Gala next week. Grant's receiving the Integrity in Leadership Award." He cleared his throat. "I'd love for you to be there. Would you want to come?" I looked down at the small folded shirt in my hands, then out the window at the driveway where his taillights had vanished 3 nights before. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. "Owen," I said. I wouldn't miss it. The Fairview Grand Ballroom held 400 chairs, a stage with a podium, and a screen the size of a garage door. I sat at table 12, between Renee's card in my clutch and a centerpiece of white hydrangeas that smelled faintly of dish soap. Owen found me before the salad course. "You'll say a few words when I call you up," he said. "Nothing long, just as his partner of 20 years. How long is a few words? However long you need." He studied my face a beat too long, the way he did when he suspected there was more under a sentence than the sentence itself. "You have something, don't you?" "I have a lot of things, Owen." He didn't ask what. That was Owen. A man who trusted people until the evidence told him otherwise, and then trusted the evidence completely. I filed that thought away. I'd need it later. Renee was 2 tables over in green silk, laughing too hard at something, her eyes finding Grant's table every 90 seconds like a metronome. Grant sat at the head of it, tuxedo pressed, name card reading Dr. Grant Whitaker, CEO in gold script. He caught my eye once, lifted his water glass an inch, and looked away first. A woman in a gray blazer slid into the empty chair beside me for a moment, badge clipped to her lapel. Sentinel Ledger.
Dana Whitaker.
I cover the hospital board. Your husband's speech tonight. Is it true you fly internationally most weeks? Domestic mostly, I said. Ask me again in 20 minutes. She raised an eyebrow, wrote nothing yet, and moved on. I watched her find a seat near the AV table, 3 rows from where Marcy stood. The lights dimmed. A hospital board member I didn't know read a citation about exceptional ethical leadership during a period of institutional change. Grant walked up to applause that filled the room like weather. He took the Crystal Award, a stylized flame, base engraved integrity and leadership, and set it on the podium with both hands, the way you'd set down something you'd carried a long way. 23 years in healthcare administration, he began, and I can tell you the hardest leadership I've ever done wasn't in a boardroom. A pause practiced. It was at my kitchen table, at 11 at night, doing spelling words with my daughter because her mother was somewhere over Nebraska. Laughter, the warm kind. Someone at table 6 said, "Oh, Grant," like he'd confessed something endearing. "I'm not complaining," he said, hand up, humble. "I chose this life. I just think we don't talk enough about what it costs the ones who stay on the ground." His eyes found Renee's table, held half a second longer than a man scanning a room for no one in particular. Some people showed me that this year. That staying is its own kind of work. I did not move. I counted his sentence the way I count a checklist item. Noted, filed, not yet actioned. 2 tables over, the reporter's pen finally started moving. The applause ran long. Grant lifted the Flame Award an inch off the podium, a photographer's flash catching the crystal. Then Owen stood, walked to the small stage mic near table 12, and said, "Into it, warm and easy. Before we move to the auction, Dana, would you come up? Say a few words." 20 years married to this man, I think we'd all love to hear from his partner. Applause turned toward me now. Grant's smile held. Renee's did not. I watched it flatten by degrees, like a screen going to stand by. I stood. My dress didn't rustle. I'd chosen it for that. I carried nothing but a slim black folder and, in my other hand, a USB drive the size of a fingernail. Under the table, Theo's last text still sat unanswered on my phone. "Mom, whatever happens tonight, I've got Lena."
Go.
I hadn't told him what I was doing. He'd guessed anyway. At the podium, Grant stepped half a foot to the side to let me near the mic, close enough that I could smell his cologne, the same bottle for 11 years. Up close, his smile had the fixed quality of something held in place by will. "Thank you, Owen." My voice came out level, the same register I use reading back an Addis report. 20 years is a long time to be called a lot of things. I set the folder on the podium's edge, not opening it yet. "Tonight my husband told you I was somewhere over Nebraska while he did the real work of raising our children." Grant's smile didn't move, but something behind his eyes did. A recalibration, the look of a man realizing the runway is shorter than he planned for. "I'd like to show you where I actually was." I nodded toward the AV table at the side of the room, where a young technician sat with a laptop, and Marcy, badge from the airline still clipped to her blazer because she'd come straight from a layover, stood just behind him. "If we could bring up the drive." Grant's voice, low, close to my shoulder, pitched for me alone. "This isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," I said, not looking at him. "You made it the time when you stood here and said it out loud." Owen, 3 feet away, had gone very still, his expression the specific stillness of a man doing math he didn't want to be doing. The screen behind the podium, 40 feet wide, still glowing faintly with the tail end of the award slideshow, Grant's headshot fading in the corner, flickered once. Then it changed. Not the flame logo. Not Grant's name in gold script. Rows of black text on white, dense and official, dates down the left margin, times beside them, a header reading flight log, Whitaker, D, Captain. Grant's hand shot toward the podium mic, fingers closing on the stand. Owen's hand closed over his wrist first, gentle as a door easing shut, and just as final. Let her finish, Grant. I'll start the response directly, with a chapter's first line as required. Owen didn't let go right away. He kept his hand there, and Grant kept his mouth shut, and for one long second the only sound in the ballroom was the ice machine behind the bar dropping a fresh load. I nodded to the AV tech. Next slide, please. The screen behind Grant's shoulder changed again.
Not the flight log this time.
A photograph of a badge scanner, timestamp burned into the corner. April 2nd, 8:02 a.m. D. Whitaker. Access granted. March 14th, I said. The day my husband told Lena's teacher I forgot to pick her up. I want you to look at what's actually on the screen instead of what he told you happened. I clicked forward myself this time. Denver turn. Departure 1:40 p.m. Arrival 6:55 p.m. Cruising altitude 37,000 feet over Nebraska at the exact hour Grant claimed I'd been unreachable, unstable, not answering my phone. You can't be unreachable at cruising altitude, I said. You're the most trackable person in the country. FAA sees it. Dispatch sees it. My airline sees it. There's no version of that afternoon where I was standing in a parking lot ignoring my daughter. A murmur went through the tables near the front. I saw Owen's jaw tighten, not at me. That's a scheduling document, Grant said. Too fast. It doesn't prove where I was, it proves. I'm not finished, I said, and something in my voice made him stop. 20 years of marriage, and he'd never once heard me use my captain voice on him. I watched it land. I nodded again. Marcy stood up from the third table, smoothing her dress, and walked to the small podium beside me without being asked. I flew right seat with Dana on March 14th, she said, clear enough to carry to the back wall. Denver turn. I signed the same dispatch release she did. I was in that cockpit with her for 5 hours and 11 minutes. Whatever happened at that school, it did not happen because Dana Whitaker was unavailable. Grant's eyes moved to Renee for the first time since I'd started talking.
She didn't move.
She was looking at her own hands. Next, I said. The medical certificate came up, clean and boring, and exactly what it was supposed to be. Blood pressure 118/76. Toxicology clear. Filed under Whitaker Dana Medical Clean 2024, dated 2 weeks before the anniversary party, valid through October of next year. My husband has spent the last several months telling teachers, neighbors, and our own family doctor that I am, and I'm quoting Dr. Aldous here, erratic, sometimes not quite herself. This is what erratic looks like on paper. It looks like nothing, because there was nothing. Grant reached for the microphone stand. Owen's hand hadn't moved off his wrist the entire time, and now it tightened. You had your turn at the podium, Owen said, quiet enough that only the front rows caught it, hard enough that everyone understood. I let the silence sit there for 3 full seconds before I clicked forward again. This was the part one had rehearsed the least because I knew if I rehearsed it, my voice would shake, and I needed it not to. A map appeared.
A pin.
Cedar Row, Unit 214. Beneath it, a column of timestamps, 90 days of them, 41 pages compressed into 6 lines on a screen. Tuesday, 8:14 p.m. to 11:02 p.m. Thursday, 7:40 p.m. to 10:55 p.m. Over and over, the same address, the same silver SUV, insurance tracked, company verified, generated in about 10 minutes once someone finally asked the right server the right question. This is the vehicle registered to Grant Whitaker, I said. This is a rental agreement on file at Cedar Row Apartments, Unit 214, tenant of record, Renee Colson. These are the nights my husband told our children's school, our doctor, and this hospital's board that he was working late, alone, holding our family together while I was somewhere on a cloud. Renee stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor, a sound like something tearing.
She didn't say anything.
She just walked, fast, toward the side exit, past the ice sculpture of 2 hands clasped that someone from facilities had ordered for the awards table, and out into the hallway. Nobody stopped her. Nobody needed to. I clicked one more time. The last slide was a text thread, Screenshots Theo had sent me before Grant could delete them from his own phone. Grant, we need one more thing before she files, something the school can corroborate. Renee, I can call the pediatrician's office again, say I'm her sister, ask about a missed appointment. Grant, perfect, make it believable. I read it out loud, once, flatly, the way I'd read a checklist. Owen Brandt stood up. He reached across the head table, past the untouched dessert plates, and lifted the small glass flame off its base in front of Grant. Integrity and leadership, engraved that afternoon, still warm from the case light it had sat under for 2 hours. I'll be taking this back, he said. Nobody clapped when it was over. Nobody knew what the etiquette was for a moment like that. People just started gathering coats, murmuring to each other, not quite looking at Grant, who sat very still with his hand still open on the table where the award had been. For 20 minutes after the doors opened, nobody spoke to him at all. I watched from across the room as the caterers cleared glasses around him like he was furniture, and Grant Whitaker, who had never once in 20 years sat through a silence he didn't fill, said nothing. I found Theo near the coat check, waiting by himself, hands in his jacket pockets. He didn't hug me. He just stepped up beside me, shoulder to shoulder, facing back toward the ballroom where his father still hadn't moved from his chair. I already checked your logbook against last month, he said quietly. Before tonight. I wanted to know before you told me. Behind us, Grant finally looked up and found both of us looking back at him. Grant didn't say anything. Owen still had a hand on his arm, not gripping, just resting there, the way you'd steady someone at the edge of a curb. We'll be in touch through counsel, Owen said to him, quiet enough that only the three of us heard it. Then, louder to the room. Thank you all for coming tonight. Please help yourselves to the rest of the evening. That was the whole ending for the people who'd paid for tables. A sentence about dessert. The real ending took 4 months. The hospital's board opened an internal review the following Monday, and by the second week Grant was on administrative leave, which is a phrase hospitals use, so they don't have to say suspended. I know this because Owen called me, not to gossip, but because he said I deserved to hear it from him instead of the Sentinel-Ledger. The paper ran 3 inches on the gala, mostly about the catering. It was the restructuring announcement 2 months later that named him outgoing CEO, effective immediately, pursuing other opportunities. Renee's name wasn't in that one. Hers came up in a smaller item about a compliance investigation into hospital vendor contracts, unrelated on paper to anything I'd shown that night, except that I knew the timeline and I knew it wasn't unrelated at all. The custody hearing was in September, in a courtroom with fluorescent light that made everyone look faintly ill. My attorney, Renata, sat beside me with a binder she barely opened, because she didn't need to. Grant's attorney tried to argue the GPS data had been obtained through surveillance without consent. Your Honor, the tracking device was placed on a vehicle without my client's knowledge. Counselor, Judge Okafor said, taking off her reading glasses and letting them hang on their chain. Is Mr. Whitaker disputing that the vehicle was his? No, Your Honor, but... Is he disputing that the address is Ms. Coulson's?
No.
Then is he disputing that the dates in this report contradict his own sworn statements about his whereabouts on those nights? Silence. Grant's attorney looked down at his legal pad like the answer might be written there. It wasn't. He sat down. She awarded me primary physical custody. Grant got alternating weekends and Wednesdays, contingent, her order specified, on no further contact with either child's school or medical providers except through the custody coordinator. I read that sentence twice in the car afterward. Then I drove home. Home stayed home. That was its own hearing in October over the house on Larkspur, who'd financed it, who'd maintained it, whose income the mortgage had actually tracked against for the last 11 years. I'd kept every statement. Grant's attorney offered a buyout figure that was insulting, then a second one that wasn't, and in the end he sold his share to me at a price a neutral appraiser set. I signed the papers at a title company with a fern in the corner that needed water. I remember thinking, absurdly, that I should have brought a bottle for it. Theo asked me once, driving him to a friend's house in November, whether I felt like I'd won. I feel like I got my house back, I said. That's not the same thing. He looked out the window for a while. Lena thinks it is. Lena's 9. Let her think that a little longer. People started apologizing around then, in a scattered, uneven way, like rain before a storm actually commits to falling. Priya brought a casserole dish to the door and stood there too long before she said, "I should have called you first, before I called anyone else." That one I believed. A woman from the country club, whose name I'd have to think hard to remember, sent a card that said she'd always known something was off about Grant, which told me she hadn't known anything. She'd just recalibrated once it was safe to. I could tell the two kinds apart now without much effort.
One wanted to make something right.
The other wanted back into a version of my life that didn't require them to have been wrong. I didn't correct either of them out loud. There didn't seem to be a point. In December, I filed a flight plan for a Saturday and told Theo and Lena to pack for 4 days. Warm weather, nothing formal. Lena guessed 3 wrong destinations before I told her. "The beach," she said, and threw both arms up like she'd won something. "You promised. You promised when I was little." "You're still little," Theo said, and she kicked him in the shin, and he let her. I flew us myself, small aircraft, my own hands on the yoke the whole way down the coast. Theo in the right seat asking questions about airspeed that I answered because he wanted to know, not because I was performing patience for anyone watching. We landed at a strip outside a town on the Gulf I'd promised them years ago, back when the promise was easier to make than to keep. Lena ran straight for the water before her shoes were even fully off. Theo stood next to me on the sand for a minute, not saying anything, which from him is its own kind of statement. "You okay?" he asked eventually. "I'm here," I said. That's the whole answer. I used to think my silence at that country club had been strength. It took me a long time to understand it had mostly been insulation for him, not for me. I'd absorbed the comments so nobody else would have to sit with the discomfort of correcting him. I don't do that anymore. I don't need to burn anything down to prove I'm not what he called me. I just stopped handing him the matches.